The sharp sound echoed through the dimly lit corridors of the apartment complex, unsettling those nearby. It wasn't a firework, but something far more ominous, a gunshot. Slowly, doors creaked open as curious faces peered into the hallway, confirming what many had suspected. A shot had indeed been fired. Outside the building, a different scene was unfolding. A crowd of about 100 people gathered, their eyes fixed on a modest window on the upper floors of apartment 24. The building itself was a drab, old structure, with nothing particularly notable about it, except for the unfolding drama inside. Reporters, passers-by, and even police officers were transfixed, phones and cameras aimed at the window, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Suddenly, the window swung open, and a soccer jersey was hung outside. Half of the crowd erupted into applause, showing their allegiance to the unseen person inside. There was a flicker of movement behind the window. Camera lenses zoomed in, breath held in anticipation. A figure emerged, but it wasn't who they expected. Instead of the man behind the chaos, a girl appeared. She looked about 15, giving a thumbs up as if to assure the crowd all was well. But her tear-streaked face and tense posture told another story entirely. She had clearly been crying for hours, and despite her brave gesture, fear radiated from her. A closer look revealed the horrifying truth. A gun was pointed at her back. Moments later, she disappeared, and another girl, also around 15, stepped into view, waving briefly before being pulled back inside. A hand holding a gun emerged next, firing a random shot into the crowd below. The gunman, a 22-year-old man, had been holding 4 teenagers hostage for 100 hours. This intense standoff became the longest hostage crisis in Brazil's history. As the country watched the situation unfold in real time, the police's handling of the event came under harsh scrutiny. The mistakes made by the São Paulo authorities would soon become as much a topic of discussion as the tragedy itself. That fateful Monday afternoon, 15-year-old Eloa and her best friend, Nayara Rodriguez, along with 2 classmates, gathered at Eloa's apartment to work on a geography project. The atmosphere was relaxed, filled with the usual chatter and laughter of teenagers. After a quick snack, Eloa began tidying up the apartment. Her parents and younger brother wouldn't be home until later in the evening, so she took a moment to clean up, folding clothes, making the bed, and washing the dishes. But the peace was shattered when the front door suddenly burst open. A man appeared in the doorway, standing there for several seconds, tense and silent, his eyes scanning the room. In his hand, he gripped a gun. The teenagers froze, unsure of what to do. Breaking the silence, the intruder announced that he had come to take Eloa's life, and the others had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. In a split second, he lunged at the 2 boys, striking them repeatedly with the gun. They were caught completely off guard, unable to process what was happening. Nayara and the other teens sat paralyzed as the man turned to Eloa and began to savagely beat her. Nayara tried to scream for help, but a gunshot into the wall cut her short. It was a stark reminder that this man was not bluffing. His eyes bulged with rage as he brandished the gun like a toy. The first hour of any hostage situation is the most critical. During this time, the captor is overwhelmed by an adrenaline rush, a euphoric sense of power and control over their victims. In this state, reality blurs and the fear of consequences vanishes. For the captor, it feels like absolute power, an invincible high similar to surviving an earthquake or a near-death experience. But as the adrenaline fades, the captor is forced back to reality, and that's when things can become even more unpredictable. The moment of extreme tension had arrived. Shortness of breath, slight trembling, and heavy sweating were now setting in for the hostage-taker. His concentration was slipping, dropping by nearly 35%, and his brain was racing, trying to predict the actions of the hostages, police, and negotiators. Physically and mentally, the captor was deteriorating, and the smallest provocation could trigger a catastrophic outcome. In such situations, three key players are involved: the hostage-taker, the hostages, and the negotiator. For Eloa Pimentel's case, a specialized tactical unit was monitoring every development. Around 100 officers formed a tight perimeter around the building. The command center, set up at Eloa's school, focused on devising a strategy to save her and the other hostages. A rapid response team was on standby, prepared to infiltrate and disarm the hostage-taker if necessary, while snipers took their positions in nearby buildings, ready to react at a moment's notice. Now, they all waited for the captor, armed, dangerous, and likely struggling with mental instability, to make his demands. But this hostage crisis had an unusual fourth party: the media. The press broadcasted the entire standoff live, allowing the public to witness every moment unfold. As word spread, crowds of onlookers began gathering outside the apartment complex, their eyes fixed on the windows of apartment 24, where Eloa and her classmates were held captive. This was one of the first times an entire country followed a crime in real time. Reporters quickly discovered that the main hostage was 15-year-old Eloa Pimentel. They dug deeper, speaking to neighbors and acquaintances, soon learning that Eloa had recently broken up with a young man, Lindenberg Fernandez Alves, who wasn't willing to let her go. The press spun this into a narrative of unrequited love, with some even speculating that the two would soon reconcile and leave the apartment hand in hand. Talk of a wedding of the century flooded the airwaves. Astonishingly, reporters managed to contact Lindenberg by phone, broadcasting the conversation live on TV. He confirmed that Eloa was his ex-girlfriend and assured everyone that things would end well. However, inside apartment 24, things were far more dire. Victor, one of the teenage hostages, had told his father he'd be home by 5 that evening. When he didn't return on time, his father grew concerned and went to Eloa's apartment to check on him. After knocking several times without a response, the man heard strange sounds from inside. Panicking, he began pounding on the door, but a chilling voice warned that if he didn't stop, everyone inside would die. Terrified, the father rushed downstairs, searching for help. He soon found a patrol car in the courtyard and alerted the officers. One of them approached the apartment, but as he neared the door, shots rang out, narrowly missing him. The sound of gunfire startled the entire building, and soon residents were calling their friends and relatives, while the news of the hostage situation spread like wildfire. Eloa Pimentel was born on April 5, 1993, in Brazil. Known for her shy and modest nature, she was close to her family, especially her mother, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Her younger brother Douglas had introduced her to Lindenberg Fernandez Alves, a man 7 years older than her when she was just 13. At first, Eloa was flattered by the attention from an older guy, But as time passed, she realized they were complete opposites. While she was intelligent and diligent, he was aggressive and impulsive. Despite their differences, their relationship continued for nearly 3 years. Eloa's parents were against her dating an older man, but they couldn't force their teenage daughter to stop seeing him. Eventually, they allowed the relationship to continue, but only under strict supervision. Whenever Eloa went out with Alves, her younger brother Douglas had to accompany them. Over time, Alves became like part of the family, but his controlling behavior became more and more apparent. He forbade Eloa from seeing friends or going anywhere without him and constantly manipulated her emotions. While he lived by his own rules, partying every weekend, he held Eloa to a strict standard. He often made her feel guilty, claiming she broke his heart, only to beg for forgiveness the next day. The relationship was toxic, but Eloa didn't fully realize it until it was too late. One evening, she finally confided in her mother, telling her that she no longer wanted to be with anyone. This decision, however, would lead to the tragic events that followed. After breaking off her tumultuous relationship, Eloa made the decision to dedicate herself entirely to her studies. Her mother supported this shift, unaware of the nightmare that lay ahead. Despite their breakup, Lindenberg Fernandez Alves was convinced he could win Eloa back. His method? Stalking her wherever she went. He would silently trail her on his motorcycle as she walked home from school, never speaking, just watching. This unnerving behavior terrified Eloa. She began taking different routes home, zigzagging through alleyways and busy streets to lose him. But no matter where she went, she felt his eyes on her. Alves's obsession grew. He began calling Eloa's home, making threats to her mother, warning of desperate measures if Eloa didn't return to him. Her mother dismissed his words, assuming it was just another one of his dramatic outbursts. After all, Alves had always demanded attention, but Eloa was already living like a hostage, long before she was actually taken captive. One afternoon, while waiting at a bus stop, Eloa felt that familiar sense of being watched. She scanned the street but didn't spot Alves's motorcycle. However, across the road, she saw him standing there glaring at her. In a flash, he darted through traffic and stood right beside her. Alves pleaded, telling Eloa he'd made mistakes but still loved her. She tried to block him out, holding her textbooks close and praying for the bus to arrive quickly. Ignoring him only made things worse. His anger flared, and in an instant, Alves slapped her across the face, causing her books to scatter. It was the first time he had physically hurt her. Eloa ran home in tears, locking herself in her room. Her brother Douglas noticed her swollen face and suspected what had happened. Although she said nothing, Douglas felt responsible. After all, he had introduced Alves to his sister. Their parents, furious at the attack, called Alves and demanded an apology. Instead, he chillingly responded that he could do much worse if Eloa didn't change her mind. Now, armed with a gun and a bag full of ammunition, Alves had stormed into the apartment, taking Eloa and her 3 friends hostage. Eloa sat on the bed, side by side with her classmates. She tried, in a trembling voice, to calm Alves, telling him they could sort things out one-on-one. She even promised to come back to him if he would just stop this madness. But Alves wasn't listening. He screamed that he no longer wanted her back. His only goal now was to end her life. Grabbing shirts from the laundry, Alves tied up all his hostages, still unsure of his next move. His hatred extended to Nayara, Eloa's close friend, whom he believed had encouraged her to end their relationship. The boys, meanwhile, were simply unfortunate collateral, though their presence irked Alves. The police attempted their first contact with the hostage-taker. The goal was to establish dialogue, listen, and understand his demands. When the negotiator called apartment 24, Alves picked up the phone, and in the background, a scream could be heard. Alves was beating Eloa. When the police asked what he wanted, Alves chillingly replied that he planned to send Eloa to the afterlife and hung up. However, within minutes, the door to the apartment opened, and two of Eloa's classmates bolted down the stairs, escaping the building. Nayara had been trying to reason with Alves, pleading for him to let the boys go since they had nothing to do with his issues. Alves, seemingly irritated by the boys' presence, agreed and allowed them to leave. This was the police's first small victory, 2 hostages freed without negotiation. The boys later told police how Alves's mood swung violently, going from threats to kill everyone to moments of calm where he reassured them that everything would be fine. The tactical team quickly recognized that Alves was highly unstable, but his willingness to cooperate gave them hope for a peaceful resolution. With proper negotiation, there was a 93% chance of success in such cases. But then, disaster struck. A phone rang in apartment 24 and Alves answered, intrigued by how someone had gotten his number. The caller, however, wasn't the police. It was a reporter, live on television, who asked Alves several questions about Eloa. The journalist even asked to speak to Eloa, who, hungry and exhausted, broke down in tears on the phone. This unauthorized call threw off the police's carefully crafted strategy. It turned out the media had bribed acquaintances of Alves to get his number. They weren't concerned with ethics or safety. They wanted an exclusive. This wasn't the first time reporters had interfered, and it wouldn't be the last. With each call, they risked the lives of the hostages, but to them, the ratings were all that mattered. Alves, relishing the attention, spoke freely, telling reporters how much he had suffered and why he had resorted to such drastic measures. He assured them he would soon release Eloa and surrender. But as the hours dragged on, this promised ending never came. News outlets spun a story of an unfortunate young man, deeply in love, while the real tragedy inside apartment 24 continued to unfold. Viewers absorbed the narrative presented on their screens, sympathizing with the spurned lover who, they were told, had suffered a nervous breakdown. Eloa Pimentel, the true victim, was barely mentioned. Instead, the media focused on Alves, painting him as a heartbroken young man driven to desperate measures. The police, meanwhile, were perplexed by the public's response and hesitated to act decisively. Snipers were unwilling to take the shot, fearing the repercussions, and Alves grew more unstable by the hour. To prevent the hostage-taker from following media coverage of the police operation, which was being broadcast live, authorities cut off electricity to the building. The police urged reporters to stop live coverage and only air footage after the hostage situation was resolved, but the media refused. The situation spiraled into chaos. After 30 hours of captivity, Alves became increasingly agitated by the crowd outside. People gathered beneath the apartment, some shouting words of encouragement, others hurling insults. His patience frayed. Alves opened the window and fired into the crowd. Thankfully, no one was hurt. The power cut was part of a calculated tactic to wear down the captor, and it worked. Alves agreed to release another hostage, Nayara. Her family was waiting anxiously outside, and she was immediately taken to the hospital. Although Nayara had no serious physical injuries, she had endured unimaginable psychological trauma. For 6 hours, police debriefed the schoolgirl, who revealed the horrors inside the apartment. Alves had separated her and Eloa, binding their hands and blindfolding them. Throughout the day, Nayara could hear Alves beating Eloa, who cried and begged for mercy, only for Alves to switch moods and demand affection from her. Alves's erratic behavior was exacerbated by lack of sleep. He dozed off in brief spurts but always woke with renewed energy. His mood swings became more frequent and more dangerous. The next day, Nayara was awoken by her grandmother. The police had an unexpected request. They wanted her to return to the apartment. Despite the trauma she had endured, the police believed Nayara could help save Eloa. Her mother was horrified at the idea, but Nayara agreed, convinced that she could help her friend. Alves had asked for both Nayara and Eloa's younger brother Douglas to be brought to the apartment to act as human shields. The police complied, hoping to de-escalate the situation. Nayara approached the apartment while talking on the phone with Eloa and Alves. When she reached the door, it swung open. She saw Eloa, her face swollen and bruised. Before Nayara could react, Alves yanked her inside and slammed the door. Once again, Nayara found herself a hostage, and the entire country watched in horror as her family witnessed this live on television. The police had gambled with Nayara's life, and they had lost. Alves now had both girls back under his control. For nearly 100 hours, Eloa and Nayara endured relentless psychological and physical abuse. Alves' moods shifted between calm and violent outbursts. Eloa, exhausted and losing her grip on reality, still refused to yield to him. She had been controlled by Alves throughout their relationship, but now she resisted. At one point, she began throwing dishes, screaming at him to either shoot her or set her free. The outburst sent Alves into a panic. He feared the police would storm the apartment if they heard the commotion. In desperation, he put a gun to Nayara's head, threatening to kill her if Eloa didn't calm down. To prove his seriousness, he struck Nayara in the stomach. This was the first time he had physically harmed her. Eloa, now utterly drained, sat down in silence, unwilling to risk her friend's life. Then, Eloa's mother made a heart-wrenching call to Alves, begging him to release her daughter. She even offered to help them resume their relationship, but Alves was beyond reason. He coldly admitted that he no longer needed Eloa, understanding that he would be imprisoned as soon as this ordeal ended. Both girls overheard the conversation and realized they were in grave danger. A person with nothing left to lose rarely shows mercy. The following day, after Alves fired a shot into the wall separating his apartment from the police's command post, the tactical team decided it was time to act. At 6 p.m., they stormed the apartment. However, the operation did not go as planned. The door was barricaded with a coffee table, slowing down the officers by crucial seconds. In that time, Alves turned his gun on the two girls and opened fire. The police fired back with rubber bullets, intending to incapacitate him. But it was too late. Alves had already shot both girls. He was subdued and handcuffed as paramedics rushed to the scene. Eloa and Nayara were taken to the hospital, but it was clear that the damage had been done. Nayara had been shot in the face, with the bullet lodged in her jaw. Eloa had been shot twice. One bullet passed through her head, causing irreversible brain damage. She was placed in an artificial coma, but there was no hope of recovery. On October 18, 2008 at 11:30 p.m., Eloa Pimentel was pronounced dead. Her funeral was attended by tens of thousands of mourners. Her organs were donated, fulfilling her parents' belief that Eloa would have wanted to help others even in death. Nayara, after numerous surgeries, made a full recovery. Despite everything, she said that she would have gone back to the apartment again if it meant saving her friend. The tragedy sparked widespread outrage, especially over the mishandling of the case by the São Paulo police, and the interference of the media. Several news channels were fined for obstructing the operation, prioritizing sensationalism over safety. In February 2012, Alves went to trial. He claimed that he had simply wanted to spend more time with Eloa, insisting that he never intended to kill her. The court found him guilty on 12 charges, sentencing him to 98 years and 10 months in prison. However, under Brazilian law, he would eventually be allowed to leave prison for work and temporary leave. The case of Eloa Pimentel remains one of Brazil's most infamous hostage crises, marked by missteps from nearly everyone involved. It's a haunting reminder of the catastrophic consequences that can arise when a situation is mishandled, leaving a nation grappling with the aftermath of a tragedy. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
You smothered her laugh, you crushed her smile, and you left us with the nightmare of the unimaginable.
Ingrid Marie Rounsaville was born on August 2, 1975, in Renton, Washington State. She was the only daughter of Yorga Bass, a devoted mother and her only known direct relative. Ingrid completed her high school education at Canyon del Oro High School in Tucson, Arizona, in 1993. Following graduation, she pursued a nursing degree at a local university and earned her Bachelor of Science in Nursing 4 years later. About 3 years after her graduation, Ingrid returned to Washington where she met Philip Line. The couple eventually married, and Ingrid took his surname, becoming Ingrid Line for the rest of her life. The joys of motherhood followed her marriage, with the birth of her daughters, Reese, Brooke, and Noelle, each born 2 years apart. Her daughters were consistently her greatest joy and purpose in life. Around 2014, Ingrid's marriage to Philip encountered difficulties, leading to a divorce that was finalized amicably, with both parents sharing custody of their daughters. Despite the separation, Ingrid retained her vibrant, energetic personality. At this time, she was working as a nurse at the Swedish Medical Center, where she was highly regarded by doctors, patients, and fellow staff for her dedication and professional commitment. Her career was undoubtedly the second most important aspect of her life. Her relationship with Philip evolved into a supportive friendship, easing the co-parenting of their daughters. This emotional maturity greatly benefited their children's upbringing. Additionally, the presence of Yorga, Ingrid's mother, was a constant source of support, playing a crucial role in her life and the lives of her granddaughters. 2 years post-divorce, by 2016, Ingrid was well settled. She enjoyed her job, which provided a satisfactory income, and lived with her 3 daughters in Renton, Washington, just a 32-minute drive from her workplace. Socially, she was fortunate to have genuine friendships, which enriched her life further. It could be said that Ingrid was content with her life, and she felt the same. Yet in her early 40s, she found herself longing for a romantic partner, a desire unmet by her social circle. Consequently, she decided to explore online dating. After encountering various men on the app, None seemed suitable for a deeper connection until she finally met someone who caught her interest. John Charlton, born in the late 1970s in Seattle, was the son of Ray and Joanne Charlton, both military personnel with strict expectations regarding the behavior of John and his sister Shannon. They aimed high for their children's futures, providing them with the best education possible and expecting them to help with household chores. However, it soon became clear that John was not living up to his parents' dreams. He harbored resentment towards them and others, a sentiment that followed him throughout his life. John's frustrations often surfaced, especially when he was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, substances to which he frequently turned. His legal troubles began in 1997 with a misdemeanor assault charge in King County, followed by a charge of reckless driving in Washington State the next year. Over time, the relationship between John and his parents deteriorated, reaching a breaking point in 2006 when, exhausted, Ray and Joanne sought a protective order against him. They had tried everything to make living together bearable, but their son's erratic and inexplicable behavior made basic agreements impossible. John's increasingly threatening demeanor led to the protective order request in Thurston County, where Ray stated that his son was verbally abusive and often tried to provoke fights. However, this request for a protective order was later denied. Ray informed the court that his son's problematic substance use stemmed from immense pressure he felt, which he believed was causing significant mental instability. On June 24, 2006, south of Ogden, a woman and her baby were waiting in the back seat of their van while her husband shopped in a bookstore. Suddenly, John appeared, demanded they exit the vehicle, and drove away with it. The police were promptly notified, and the van was spotted on Interstate 15. An officer followed it to a store parking lot in Riverdale, Utah, where John was arrested. According to Utah's police and judicial records, John was charged with aggravated robbery. He agreed to plead guilty to a lesser charge of attempted aggravated robbery and was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison. However, he only served about 21 months and was released on June 24, 2008. Just a few months later, John added to his criminal record with a felony robbery conviction in Montana and a misdemeanor assault in Idaho. He spent approximately 3.5 years in prison before being released onto the streets in 2012. From that point on, details about his life became murky. One factor that perhaps made John more dangerous was his physical attractiveness. He was a handsome man with a charismatic personality when he chose to be. With these traits, he began to explore other ways of causing harm through romance and seduction, only to later unleash his anger. One thing was certain: John was not an ordinary person, and neither was his daily life. Around mid-2012, he took a temporary job where he started a relationship with a coworker named. Initially, she was taken in by his charm. However, there were some signs that, although not entirely clear to her, made her cautious. Something about him, something unsettling and mysterious in his demeanor. Trusting her instincts, she decided to end the relationship. By 2013, they had parted ways. After that, there was a string of women in his life, whose identities remained confidential for security reasons. These women were later consulted by authorities regarding John's criminal career and personality traits. In their subsequent statements, the ex-girlfriends revealed details such as aggressive and dangerous behavior, as well as confessions of major crimes he claimed to have committed, the veracity of which authorities were trying to ascertain. Broadly speaking, John lacked stability in both his work and personal life. Essentially a homeless day laborer, he would either sleep on the streets or stay at the homes of ex-girlfriends, with whom he maintained casual relationships. Among his friends, John was known as a reserved individual, but alcohol and illicit substances would often transform him into someone nearly unrecognizable. This complex character, whose physical attractiveness often opened doors for him, was the same man Ingrid met through an online dating site. After exchanging messages and finding mutual interest, they agreed to meet in person. Their first date was set for Friday, April 8th. The plan was to watch the Seattle Mariners' opening game and then, if things went well, go out for drinks afterward. On the eve of their date, Ingrid shared her plans with friends and coordinated with Philip so he could look after the girls that evening. On April 8th, John and Ingrid attended the baseball game, which started just after 7 p.m. They enjoyed themselves enough to continue the evening at a local bar. Around 10:35 p.m., Ingrid texted a friend to confirm that everything was going smoothly with her new acquaintance. However, the night took a sinister turn shortly after. It appears that Ingrid brought John back to her home. Instead of the intimacy she had hoped for, she met a tragic end. The seemingly pleasant man she met online revealed his darkest side. He not only took her life, but also dismembered her body using a sharp gardening tool. After cleaning the crime scene, he placed the parts into plastic bags he had found in the kitchen. He then took Ingrid's car keys and drove her vehicle, a 2015 Toyota Highlander, to Seattle, where he disposed of the remains. John likely continued to drink alcohol after disposing of the evidence, as he did not show up at his ex-girlfriend's house later that night or the next morning, even though she had expected him early on Saturday and was surprised by his absence. Meanwhile, that same morning, Philip arrived at his ex-wife's house around 10 a.m. to drop off the girls. Despite repeatedly knocking, he received no response. He then took a closer look around and noticed that Ingrid's vehicle, which was usually parked outside, was missing. This was particularly odd because he knew Ingrid was off work that day, which was why she had made plans to go out the previous night. Ingrid was a devoted mother who always wanted her daughters close by, and she was invariably at home when Phil brought them over. If her romantic evening had gone on longer than expected, they had a trusting enough relationship that she would have told him to keep the girls longer. Concerned by her absence, Phil repeatedly knocked on the door and tried calling her cell phone several times, all attempts unsuccessful. He then decided to contact Ingrid's mother. Shortly after, Jorga arrived with a spare set of keys Ingrid had given her for emergencies. Upon entering the house, they immediately noticed Ingrid's wallet, purse, and cell phone were left behind, but there was no sign of Ingrid herself. She quickly checked the last messages on her daughter's phone and saw messages from John about the date. She then sent a text to John, asking if he knew anything about Ingrid's whereabouts. He replied that they had indeed gone out the previous night but had parted ways after the game because she needed to return home to her daughters. She informed him that a police officer would need to speak with him since he might have been the last person to see her. After that, all communication from John ceased, prompting Ingrid's mother to alert the authorities. A few hours later, while the police began their investigation, a Seattle resident was about to make a horrifying discovery. As he was taking out his recycling, he noticed 3 white kitchen bags at the bottom of another bin, out of place because kitchen waste is organic and does not belong in the recycling. When he went to correct this mistake and picked up the first bag, he was struck by its unusual weight and nearly professional packaging. Seconds later, he was staring in horror at the outline of a face protruding from the bag. Shocked, he called a neighbor to confirm what he was seeing. Both, still in disbelief, contacted emergency services. The police and forensic team arrived within minutes. Inside those 3 bags were human remains, a leg and foot, part of an arm, and a head. Back in Washington, as panic spread among dozens of Ingrid's friends and family, they took to social media to alert the community, the police, and the media about her disappearance. Suspicion quickly fell on the man she had dated last. Meanwhile, John visited his ex-girlfriend's house. Though she noticed he had a swollen lip, he dismissed it as nothing significant. He claimed it was the result of an attempted robbery the night before he went out to a bar. Meanwhile, the Seattle police soon learned that their counterparts in Renton were searching for a missing woman. Coupled with social media posts, this information helped them connect the dots. After comparing the photos shared online with the remains found, they identified them as belonging to the same person. A search warrant was issued for Ingrid's home, where a thorough search revealed an almost empty box of garbage bags, similar to those found in the dumpster. Bloody traces were found in the bathtub drain, and perhaps most damning, a pruning saw with blood, tissue, and bone on its serrated blade was found leaning against the bathroom wall. The examination of Ingrid's computer allowed officers to access her purchase of tickets for the Mariners game. Considering the link she had with Phil, the police initially pursued this lead since an ex-husband might harbor resentments. However, he was quickly ruled out. The car was located in downtown Seattle on the night of April 11, 2016. The police lifted 3 fingerprints from underneath the driver's door handle, where they also found the same type of white garbage bags. Subsequently, the officers interviewed John. His online dating profile indicated he wasn't looking for anything serious, but that was not a crime. At first glance, he seemed like a normal guy. When asked about his residence to ensure they could contact him again if needed, he admitted to not having a fixed place to live. The officers sensed some discomfort when they asked about Ingrid. In his account, he said that after the baseball game, they took a bus and went to Ingrid's house. He believed there might have been an intimate encounter, but he wasn't sure because he had passed out. He added that she had not wanted to introduce him to her daughters and had later left him downtown. He woke up hours later on a bench in front of a building. Regarding his last interaction with Ingrid, or at least what he remembered of it, John claimed to have sent her a message that morning asking how she had slept. As the investigators delved deeper into his story, they uncovered his peculiar relationship with his ex-girlfriend, but that was not illegal either. John eventually asked for a lawyer. The officers left the room but did not stop the video recording. If everyone already thought he was odd, what happened next confirmed it. The cameras captured John rolling up his sweatshirt to use as a pillow while he took a nap on the floor. The next step involved interviewing John's ex-girlfriend, who reported that he arrived later than expected that Saturday and noted his bruised lip.
Wow, this could have been me.
However, this was not particularly surprising to the agents, as they had already observed an abrasion on his head and scratches on his chin, chest, and arms. Simultaneously, the analysis confirmed that the fingerprints on Ingrid's car matched John's. Consequently, on Monday, April 11, 2016, John was brought before a judge who set his bail at $5 million, a sum he could not afford, resulting in his detention as the primary suspect in Ingrid's murder. Several of John's former friends and ex-partners came forward to assist the police with the investigation. Additionally, an extensive search for the rest of Ingrid's body commenced, involving the FBI and other regional law enforcement agencies, due to the grisly nature of the crime. John was assigned a public defender who argued that no forensic evidence or expert testimony linked him to the crime. Nevertheless, on Tuesday, April 12th, the judge dismissed these arguments and found probable cause to hold him on a charge of second-degree murder. That evening, hundreds gathered near Ingrid's home for a vigil to honor her memory. Those who knew her highlighted her excellent human qualities, and friends present expressed that the pain of her loss felt like an open wound. They acknowledged that the hardest impact was on her family, particularly her mother and 3 daughters, who were deeply affected by the tragedy. The following day, Wednesday, April 13th, the county coroner's office officially confirmed that the remains were Ingrid's. The preliminary autopsy report listed blunt force trauma as the cause of death, although the exact date of the crime could not be determined. 2 days later, a sanitation worker found more body parts in a different recycling bin. On April 18th, a man received a phone call from a neighbor. Inside his recycling bin, a torso with a pierced navel was discovered. Ingrid had a navel piercing, confirming the remains were hers. As part of gathering evidence for the trial, police returned to Ingrid's house. This time, they dismantled the plumbing and found more blood in the newly exposed drain trap. They also used a chemical called luminol, which glows in the presence of blood traces, confirming that the crime scene had been cleaned. Despite the initial findings in the preliminary autopsy report, further examination of the body by the forensic pathologist revealed more details. Upon closer inspection, small signs of bleeding were found in Ingrid's eyes. Additionally, marks on her neck led to the definitive conclusion that she had been strangled, and subsequently, her body was dismembered in her own home. The toxicology report indicated that Ingrid had no drugs in her system, but her blood alcohol content was 0.74. On October 2, 2017, in a King County courtroom, John pled guilty to first-degree premeditated murder. His guilty plea was part of a plea bargain that resulted in a shortened trial, sparing Ingrid's family and the community from the ordeal of a lengthy and distressing jury trial. However, his plea was not solely an act of mercy to alleviate the victim's family's suffering. It also afforded him certain procedural benefits. The sentencing hearing took place on January 5, 2018. John's parents attended the court in a dual show of support for their son and respect for the grief that Ingrid's family was enduring. During his brief statement in court, John acknowledged that no words could suffice to ease the pain he had caused, admitting the irreversible harm of his actions. The impact statements from Ingrid's family then resonated deeply. Phil condemned John for taking away a vital companion and the mother of their children, lamenting the maternal guidance and cherished family moments that his daughters would now forever miss. He emphasized that due to John's actions, his daughters would never again receive maternal advice. A friend of Ingrid, visibly shaken, spoke to the brutality with which John ended her dear friend's life, labeling him a coward who initially tried to flee and hide. When finally cornered by the police, instead of owning up to his actions, he claimed he was too drunk to remember what he had done. Addressing John, the judge expressed her wish to imprison him for life if it were possible. Instead, she sentenced him to 27 years and 9 months in prison, adhering to the recommendation of the prosecutors as part of the plea deal that facilitated the shortened trial. Ultimately, the sentence handed down was the harshest possible under state sentencing guidelines. A member of John's defense team expressed hope that his guilty plea and the prison sentence might offer some closure and perhaps a measure of peace to Ingrid's loved ones. When the sentencing was reported in the media, there was significant public outcry. Many expressed their dismay, particularly because John could potentially be released by the age of 60. Furthermore, his failure to provide a motive for his actions did not work in his favor. No further arrests have been made in connection with Ingrid's disappearance. Her tragic death has sparked discussions and debates about the safety of online dating. Meanwhile, Phil has chosen to focus on the well-being of his daughters, as their mother would have wished. In this spirit, a fundraising page set up for the 3 young girls successfully gathered $270,000. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In 2014, during a routine traffic stop in Smith County, Mississippi, an incredibly disturbing case came to light. The police were drawn to a truck due to a strong odor emanating from it. As the officer asked the driver for his paperwork, he observed that the man appeared anxious and confused. The vehicle reeked of decay, and upon further investigation, the driver was identified as 37-year-old Timothy Jones, Jr. The situation became even more concerning when the officers learned that Jones had 5 children. Yet, the truck was empty, containing only some clothing items. When asked about his children, Jones initially denied having any, then changed his story, claiming he had 3 children who were supposedly in South Carolina. This inconsistency raised suspicions, prompting the officer to detain Jones for further questioning. What they discovered rendered them speechless. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple with 5 children all under the age of 9, Mara Grace, Elias Xavier, Natan Hayside, Gabriel Asher, and Elaine Marie. They lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When Amber met Timothy, she was drawn to his world and felt connected to him and his lifestyle. They were teenagers when they met and married very young. Timothy attended school in Mississippi while Amber focused on homemaking. From a young age, Timothy witnessed his mother's mental health deteriorate due to schizophrenia. She eventually required constant care and left home to work in intimate services, with his family telling Timothy she had simply gone far away and abandoned him. His father, Timothy Jones Sr., who was 20 at the time, moved with Timothy to his grandmother's house, where he was exposed to domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcohol. Despite his tough upbringing, Timothy showed a talent for numbers, solving math problems with ease, and could disassemble and reassemble computers to make them faster. He seemed to have a natural understanding of how machines worked. However, things changed when Timothy reached adolescence and began hearing voices at the age of 10. By middle school, he had started using drugs and drinking excessively. At 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident, which affected his frontal lobe, the brain area controlling impulses and linked to psychopathy in various studies. After the accident, Timothy's behavior became erratic and stubborn. He was also very jealous of his father, feeling that anyone who had a relationship with him took away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy believed his father didn't love him and feared he would end up abandoned. Despite his growing intelligence, his emotional development was stunted, leaving him with the mentality of a child and lacking common sense and empathy. After finishing high school, Timothy Jones Jr. dreamed of joining the elite U.S. Navy SEALs. His intelligence earned him a chance to study there, but he faced a major hurdle. He lacked athletic talent and discipline, lasting only a few weeks in training. Often found crying out of frustration, he struggled to keep up with the rigorous demands. This led to depression, and a subsequent drug test revealed substance abuse, resulting in his expulsion. In 2000, Timothy began associating with individuals involved in bad things. One day, the police found him in possession of illegal substances and discovered he had been writing checks in his father's name. The police warned Jones's father that he had to press charges against his son or face arrest himself. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sent to a labor camp in an Illinois state prison for a year. Upon release, he seemed transformed, having found religion as a guiding force in his life. He memorized significant portions of religious texts and aspired to live strictly by them. Jones met Amber, the mother of his children, while they both worked at an amusement park in Chicago. After some time, in 2004, he invited her to his Pentecostal church. Within weeks, they decided to marry, adhering to the church's expectation for immediate marriage. Amber was 19 and Timothy was 22. Soon, Amber realized the church's strictness. Women couldn't cut their hair, wear pants, makeup, or jewelry, and Timothy believed that women should be submissive to their husbands, be fruitful, and multiply. Timothy was deeply religious, dedicating himself entirely to the church. Many advised him against taking the Bible literally, but he remained steadfast. The young couple quickly had 3 children, Mara, Elias, and Natan, each born a year apart. With their growing family, they moved to Mississippi, where Timothy eventually graduated with highest honors from the state university, earning a degree in computer science and engineering. Timothy Jones Jr. managed all of this while being married, having children, and working various jobs. His family couldn't have been prouder. Tim was truly a remarkable genius with a promising future. Everything seemed to be going well for him. He landed a job as a computer chip manufacturer at Intel, which Amber saw as their ticket to a better life. After living in student housing in Mississippi, they dreamed of raising their 3 children in a bigger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Tim chose to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank because he dreamed of living on a farm. He bought animals to raise, and Amber stayed home with the kids and the animals in this isolated area. She didn't have a car or know how to drive. By 2012, the couple had 2 more children, and problems began to arise. Tim doubted the paternity of their youngest daughter, Elaine, and wanted Amber to homeschool the children, though she only had a high school education. Amber felt increasingly isolated with no family nearby and Tim's family in Mississippi. She felt inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions escalated when Tim accused Amber of having an affair with a neighbor. The marriage crumbled and they considered divorce. Tim didn't want Amber in the children's lives, so he visited a therapist and asked for a sworn statement for his divorce lawyer, claiming he was fit to raise the children alone. Amber, without a lawyer and unsure what to do, eventually decided it was best for the children to stay with their father, as she had nothing to offer, no job or education. Tim gained primary custody as the sole financial provider, and Amber was granted regular visitation rights. She left her husband and children. Mentally, Tim was losing control, anguished by his failed marriage. He began using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily angered over minor things, and Amber reported that he once beat her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. Unable to manage work and home, he hired a nanny service. Despite his condition, the first 2 nannies noted that his home was immaculate, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter. The nanny soon became his lover, and Tim tried to indoctrinate her into his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, wearing long dresses, growing her hair out and being subordinate to him. When she refused, their relationship deteriorated. Crystal later testified that Tim was extremely harsh with his children, making them stand on their toes for hours as he believed punishment was necessary for their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal left, Tim hired another nanny. She noticed a drastic change in Tim. His once clean home was now filled with trash and dirty clothes, and there were even cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He developed the habit of feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to one meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the conditions in Tim's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school, attended by the older children, had already reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had previously required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. When asked about the injuries, the children said their father would grab them by the neck and slam them against the wall. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Tim picked up his 3 older children from elementary school, then his 2 younger ones from the nanny. Around 7 p.m., Timothy got angry about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son, Natan, about the damage. When Natan said he didn't know, Timothy forced Natan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises before having him repeat the circuit over and over again. Whenever Natan would slow down, Timothy would whip him with a belt. While Natan was being punished, Amber, Tim's ex-wife, called to speak with her children. The calls were logged at 7 o'clock, 7:02, 7:05, and 7:09, until Timothy finally answered at 7:10. During the call, Natan told his mother about the punishment for the broken outlets, saying it was an accident. Enraged, Timothy ended the call, telling Amber to stop protecting the boy. After hours of torture, Natan was exhausted, dehydrated, and begging for it to end. He collapsed, putting an end to it all. Timothy carried him to bed and left him alone without water or aid. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times. At 8:30, Timothy searched for an explicit scene from the movie American History on YouTube, despite knowing his son was already unresponsive. Around 1 a.m., Jones took his 8-year-old daughter, Mara, to a local convenience store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. Upon returning home, he grabbed Mara and began to strangle her. Next, Timothy went to his 7-year-old son, Elias, and did the same thing. After that, he removed his belt and went to Gabriel, who was 2, and Elaine, who was 1. He placed the belt around their necks and pulled until they stopped breathing. Seeing that none of the children were moving, he took their sheets and blankets, wrapped them separately, and placed them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at around 7:43 a.m., but there was no answer. At 9:36, the nanny called, and on her second attempt, Jones answered. She asked if he would be dropping the younger kids at daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them next week, mentioning that they were out and would return by Tuesday. That morning, he drove from place to place. Between noon and 2 p.m., he searched online for drugs out of state. At 12:17, Jones was near Alabama, and his grandmother called him multiple times, but he did not answer and continued to ignore her messages throughout the day, totaling 23 attempts. Between 3 and 5 p.m., Jones searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi and for camping sites in South Carolina. At 8:04 p.m., his location was recorded in Georgia. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. His phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey. On August 31st at 10:08 a.m., Jones searched the internet for camping stores and RV parks in South Carolina landfills, Lexington County landfills, and animal services, in addition to 2 songs. At 4:54 p.m., the nanny texted Timothy Jones Jr. to remind him to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel and Elaine on Tuesday. An hour later, he replied, saying he had left South Carolina with the children to start fresh, and asked her to clean the mobile home, offering her to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. His ex-wife called him at 7 p.m., but he did not answer. On September 1st, he was driving from place to place. The next morning at 10:35, he searched the internet for body in landfill, how to make muriatic acid, camping near Colombia, countries with no extradition laws, and facing legal problems, where should I run? Throughout the day, he received text messages from the nanny informing him she had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him, asking if he was coming to work. At around 6 p.m., Amber called, but he did not answer. On the morning of September 3rd, a co-worker called twice without getting a response. Later, Timothy was captured on surveillance video at a well-known store, buying a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles. At 3:37 a.m., he searched online for Tim Jones's missing children. His location was recorded in Charleston, South Carolina. At 6:33 a.m. on September 4th, he was seen at a bank, depositing a check for $3,518. The next day, September 5th, his location was tracked to Louisville, Georgia. His phone was only turned on once that day. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and left them in a clearing along a forest road in a rural area in Alabama. This was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of Timothy Jones Jr.'s vehicle since August 29th. By 7 p.m. on September 6th, he was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached the vehicle and noticed a putrid odor emanating from inside. Additionally, the carpet appeared to be stained with bleach, as if it had been recently cleaned. The sheriff requested Jones's identification and the car's registration. He observed that Jones seemed to be under the influence of drugs. Upon checking his information, the police officer found out he was wanted in South Carolina over a child welfare issue. When asked about his children's whereabouts, Jones first claimed he had no children, then said he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety. After making the calls, they immediately arrested Jones. The police mentioned that as soon as Jones was placed in the patrol car, he became emotional and started telling the officers what he had done to the children. He explained that he felt a deep sorrow and angered because one of his sons was playing with an electrical outlet. He grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he passed out. After that, he did the same to his other son, using a belt because his hands were too large. When his eldest daughter walked in and saw what was happening, he grabbed her and choked her with his hands until she turned purple. In another account, Jones said that when he saw his son playing with the electrical outlet, he believed the boy was trying to harm him, which led him to kill his son. In an audio recording, investigators are heard discussing how Timothy Jones Jr. forced his 6-year-old son, Nathan, to do hours of physical exercises after the boy accidentally turned off the electrical outlets in the family's living room. Jones told investigators that he eventually sent Natan to bed, only to find him dead later when he checked on him. When asked why he did it, Jones mentioned that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head and believed his children were conspiring against him. He also thought his children would be happier in heaven. During his days on the run, Jones traveled through the Southeast with the bodies of his 5 children under blankets in his car. He ultimately dumped their bodies in a remote forest in Alabama before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. By September 9th, after giving his second statement, Tim claimed he didn't mean to do it. He said the punishment imposed on Natan got out of hand, and when he went to the boy's room, he found him lifeless due to the strenuous exercises. Not knowing what to do, he decided to end the lives of all his children. The pathologist mentioned that after the autopsy, she couldn't definitively establish the cause of death. However, she suggested that Natan might have been so weakened from the excessive exercise that it didn't take much force for his father to finish him off. Investigators questioned why Jones didn't call 911 if it was truly an accident. Instead, he tried to hide and dispose of his children. That same day, Tim agreed to lead investigators to the location where he had dumped the bodies. On September 10th, the remains of his 5 children were recovered. On September 11th, the evidence collected from Jones's car was turned over to South Carolina authorities. Among the items cataloged were family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters to the children written by their mother Timothy Jones's diploma from Mississippi State University, and Jones's passport. There were also handwritten notes by Timothy Jones Jr., which included to-do lists such as removing bodies, grinding bones into powder or small pieces, burning bodies, and items like camping supplies, gas, and muriatic acid. On September 13, 2014, Jones was admitted to a correctional institution and placed in a special cell, away from the general population. Since his incarceration, Jones has been evaluated by mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Opinions among these professionals varied. Some diagnosed him with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder, suggesting that his mental state at the time of the crime might have been worsened by drug use and the traumatic brain injury he suffered at 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychosis. These theories were presented to the jury during the trial. However, other specialists argued that Tim was mentally competent and that his actions to conceal evidence, including his children, indicated that he knew he had done something morally and legally wrong. His internet search history further suggested he knew exactly what he was doing and what needed to be done. The prosecution argued that Tim cracked under the stress of a broken marriage and the demands of caring for 5 young children. According to his statements, the trigger for his actions was his wife's alleged infidelity with their neighbor at the time, who is now her husband. She testified that she never committed adultery and that her relationship with the neighbor began after her divorce. The trial took place in late May 2019, involving weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against Timothy. The crime is considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. Mara's last words to her father were, "Daddy, I love you." When police searched the house after the crime, they found Natan's favorite toy from Toy Story, broken into pieces. Natan seemed to be the most severely punished, yet all testimonies agreed on one thing: the children loved their father. On June 13, 2019, after 2 hours of deliberation, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to death. He is currently in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, wearing a green jumpsuit that identifies him as a death row inmate. This tragic case ended the lives of innocent children due to marital problems, with both the father and mother making irreversible mistakes. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
She kind of came out and I tried to hold her and she's breathing. She doesn't have a heartbeat.
So now, what do you do when you realize that she's not going to make it?
I have to bury her. I couldn't tell anybody.
Kim and Scott Richardson had a happy marriage, and their love and commitment brought their firstborn Skylar into the world on March 9, 1999. Later, they welcomed Jackson. Both children grew up in a peaceful environment. Weekends were family bonding times at home. Neighbors often saw them in their backyard, where Kim and Scott would grill food and work in the garden. Skylar and Jackson enjoyed playing with the family dogs, their laughter filling the air. Family celebrations, including birthdays, holidays, and graduations, took place around bonfires in the yard, which had witnessed countless joyful moments. It was a refuge of peace. No one could have imagined that in this backyard, amidst the Richardson family's happiness, an unutterable secret was buried. As Skylar grew older, weight and diet, issues that sometimes hide behind a seemingly perfect facade, played a central role in her life. These concerns became her obsession, leading to unexpected and painful situations. For Kim, the impact of these issues was undeniable. Her worry began in Skylar's early adolescence when her daughter already showed signs of eating disorders. At 12 years old, Skylar was obsessed with calories, refusing to buy gum because it added 5 calories to her diet. She attended high school in Ohio, excelling as a cheerleader. Being a cheerleader required her to be small and agile, traits she had, making her a perfect flyer. This role involved performing aerial stunts and holding complex poses for a few seconds before returning to the ground. However, the pressure to stay thin marked the beginning of Skylar's struggle with her weight. Her obsession with not gaining even a gram led to dangerous behaviors like induced vomiting, but when the cheerleading season ended, Skylar would binge eat. She then subjected herself to severe fasting periods. Discussing her weight was a taboo topic in the family, and Skylar's extremely reserved nature made addressing the issue difficult. The Richardsons sought professional help, including doctors, therapists, and nutritionists, but no intervention seemed to ease her suffering. Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphia, a disorder characterized by an obsession with perceived physical flaws. Amid her dissatisfaction with herself, she became increasingly reserved and kept numerous secrets, deeply worrying her parents. However, from the outside, everything seemed perfect at home. Skylar was seen as a beautiful and popular young woman during her high school years, excelling as a cheerleader and radiating vitality and joy in her school community. Her younger brother Jackson was on the football team at the same school, which contributed to the Richardson family's reputation as exemplary. In late July 2016, Just before her senior year of high school, Skylar started a relationship with a friend's cousin, but it ended quickly. However, in January 2017, she found a new love, Brandon, a junior at her school. Skylar seemed happy and even appeared to be gaining weight, which gave her family hope. This change suggested that Skylar had her eating disorder under control. Her choice of a form-fitting dress for prom and her healthy appearance increased her parents' confidence in her well-being. In March, Skylar even went on a family vacation, wearing a two-piece bikini showing some curves. Skylar and Brandon's relationship seemed to be going well, and her mother's concerns led her to address a sensitive topic: pregnancy. Kim wanted Skylar to take measures to protect herself, so she took her to the gynecologist in April. At this point, Skylar was 18 years old, so she went into the exam room alone. What should have been a routine visit for a contraceptive prescription turned traumatic for Skylar. Her tears as she left the office indicated something troubling, but Kim assumed it was due to it being her first visit, which can be emotional and somewhat invasive for a reserved girl like her daughter. Little did her mother know that the cause of her tears was a shocking revelation. The doctor informed Skylar that she was pregnant, and not just newly pregnant. She was already 8 months along. Skylar desperately asked the doctor to keep this secret, as her parents couldn't know. 9 days after the gynecologist visit on May 5, 2017, Skylar attended prom with Brandon. Despite being in her advanced pregnancy, her form-fitting dress fit her surprisingly well. It's worth noting that she had tried on the same dress in February, and it fit the same 3 months later. Apparently, she hadn't gained any weight in those 90 days, which is highly unusual for someone so far along in pregnancy. Perhaps that's why no one noticed the secret that was about to change her life forever. Less than 48 hours after attending prom, nature took its course, and it was time for the baby to be born. In the early hours of May 7th, Skylar gave birth to a small baby girl in the bathroom of the Richardson home. The newborn, apparently lifeless, became a dark secret that Skylar feared her parents would discover. In a panic, she decided to bury the baby in the backyard of their home. No one knew about this incident. In the weeks that followed, Skylar continued her life, outwardly acting as if nothing had happened. She didn't tell anyone about the tragic event that haunted her. In July 2017, she visited her gynecologist again and asked for a contraceptive prescription. As expected, the doctor asked what had happened with her pregnancy. She replied that her baby had been stillborn and that she had buried the body in the backyard of her family's home. Unbeknownst to her, revealing this secret set justice in motion, the police received a concerning call from a doctor who reported that after a gynecology and obstetrics consultation, a patient had given birth at home and buried the baby in the backyard. This call triggered a series of events that shook the Richardson family to its core. Kim and Scott were taken aback when the police arrived at their door on July 14, 2017. It was a sunny summer day, and Skylar was at her grandmother's pool, enjoying happy moments with her boyfriend and cousins. She had no idea they were coming for her. The family was entirely unaware of the gravity of the situation when the police contacted them. According to Scott's later statements, the police assured them that they only wanted to talk to Skylar about something she might have witnessed and insisted she was not in any trouble. Trusting those words, Scott took his daughter to the police station without proper legal representation, an action he would later consider one of the biggest mistakes of his life. On that same July 14th, when Scott accompanied his daughter to the police station, he had no idea that she had been hiding such a dark secret. At the station, the officers asked him to wait outside since Skylar was an adult. Inside an interrogation room, a police officer read Skylar her rights and began pressuring her to reveal what had happened with her baby.
So just kind of help me, walk through this. So what did you do? I guess, is your bedroom upstairs or bathroom upstairs? Okay, so you had to walk downstairs?
I had to clean myself up a little.
Are you carrying her?
Yes.
Did you go into the garage, or do you have an outdoor shed where you have a shovel?
My garage.
The family was about to face a crisis that would impact their lives in unimaginable ways. In the small interrogation room, Skylar finally shared the truth with the investigators.
Please just be honest, what's going to happen?
I don't know, okay? I'm in here observing.
Jail?
No. You're not going to jail. No.
No, and I'm not going to.
Just relax, okay? Listen, just relax, okay?
I don't want to go to jail.
I know you don't. Just relax,
I don't have to go to jail, though, right?
Listen, I understand that you're sorry, and I understand that you're upset, and I understand that you didn't want this to happen, okay? Just take some deep breaths, okay? Everything's going to be okay.
I don't have to go to jail.
You're not going to jail.
In the early hours of May 7th, Skylar faced the unimaginable alone in her bathroom. She gave birth to a baby who showed no signs of life. She held the newborn for hours, hoping for a miracle that never came. Resigned to the heartbreaking reality and ensuring not to wake her family, she quietly buried her daughter in a makeshift grave in their backyard using a small garden trowel. During a tense interrogation that followed, the investigator eventually disclosed to Skylar's parents, Scott and Kim, the grave reason for their daughter's questioning. Shocked by the news and unable to comprehend how they had missed the signs of her pregnancy, they listened as Skylar shared the baby's name, Annabelle, and revealed the brief relationship with the father, a cousin of a friend from the previous summer. This revelation devastated her mother, Kim, who later expressed her anguish over the pain Skylar had endured alone. As the family absorbed this new reality, investigators were already moving towards their home to dig deeper into the case, unbeknownst to them. The small town quickly buzzed with the news as police activity spiked in an area unaccustomed to such attention, drawing national media to the story of the troubled young cheerleader. That same day, authorities exhumed the remains of baby Annabelle for forensic examination. After enduring over 5 hours of grueling questions at the station, Skylar and her parents were allowed to go home. However, the respite was short-lived. 6 days later, the investigators returned with unsettling news from the autopsy. There were signs of charring on Annabelle's bones, suggesting she had been burned, which led them to suspect homicidal violence. On July 20th, 2017, during a second intense interview without her legal or parental support, Skylar was directly accused by police of killing and burning her baby. Throughout the interview, she steadfastly refuted the allegations, denying any use of heat or fire 17 times, and insisting 29 times that Annabelle was stillborn, maintaining her innocence against the grave charges laid before her.
Did you hear any crying after? Or did you hear any little crying? Okay.
Under the intense pressure of the interrogation, Skylar eventually changed her story, admitting that she might have partially burned the baby's body. When asked if the baby had made any noises at birth, she hesitantly mentioned that there might have been a sound. After an hour of intense questioning, the detectives decided they had enough to arrest her and charged her with reckless homicide, suspecting the baby had suffocated. Skylar was released on bail, but this was just the beginning of her legal battles. The prosecutor publicly laid out the charges: aggravated murder, which could lead to a life sentence, involuntary manslaughter, child endangerment, and abuse of a corpse. He argued that Skylar's actions were driven by her family's desire to maintain a perfect facade. Despite these heavy accusations, Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, remained determined to clear her name with the help of their lawyers. Scott voiced his frustration over how the police had misled them from the beginning, telling them Skylar wasn't in trouble, only to detain her and search their home for evidence once they brought her to the station. Kim described the ordeal as a nightmare, noting how Skylar's arrest reignited her struggles with eating disorders and psychological stress. The legal drama attracted intense media scrutiny and public speculation, resulting in a gag order, although by then the Richardsons were already facing widespread criticism and hostility. Online and outside their home, the family endured harsh criticism, protests, and threats, feeling under constant surveillance and harassed by people who distorted their images online. Amid this turmoil, they hired experienced defense attorneys who contended that Skylar's confession was coerced. The case took a twist when the pathologist who initially reported charring on the baby's remains withdrew her statement, confirming there was no evidence of burning. Despite this new evidence, the prosecutor stood firm on the charges, insisting on the validity of Skylar's initial admissions during the interrogation. However, the defense succeeded in getting Skylar placed under house arrest. At home, surrounded by books and her dogs, she tried to find some peace under a pine tree where her parents had placed an angel ornament at the burial site of her baby, whom she called Angel. In a reflective interview, Scott explained that from Skylar's perspective, she was handling the sudden and tragic event the best she could, believing the baby was stillborn. He detailed how she tenderly placed the baby in the ground and marked the spot with a flower. As time passed, her dreams of attending the University of Cincinnati had to be put on hold. The uncertainty of her future weighed heavily on her and her family. However, the prosecution viewed this as her undergoing the justice process that was deemed necessary, aiming to seek justice for the baby. The case itself was fraught with tension and division. Kim, Skylar's mother, voiced her frustrations with the legal process, feeling that the defense's points were completely disregarded by the prosecution, which she found to be exceedingly cold and dismissive. The prosecution maintained that an innocent life had been unjustly taken, and it was their duty to seek reparation. In July 2019, the case took an unexpected turn when the prosecutor offered Skylar a deal: drop the aggravated murder charge if she pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, thus avoiding a trial but still facing up to 15 years in prison. This proposal brought immense anguish to the Richardson family, but ultimately, the decision rested with Skylar. On one decisive Sunday morning, Skylar resolved not to plead guilty to crimes she maintained she did not commit. She chose to let a jury decide her fate at trial. 2 years after the distressing events, the trial began on September 3, 2019. The prosecution started with a startling revelation, quoting a text message from Skylar to her mother that exposed her troubled emotional state shortly after she secretly gave birth and buried the baby in the backyard. The prosecution also displayed a selfie Skylar had taken at the gym that same day, using these pieces to argue that Skylar had no intention of keeping the baby. Although proving the baby was born alive was a challenge, the prosecution contended that Skylar's own admissions during interrogation supported their case. Witnesses for the prosecution testified that Skylar had seen the baby's arms move and heard her make sounds, suggesting life. They also claimed Skylar might have inadvertently harmed the baby. Moreover, they accused her of trying to burn the baby's remains. Trey Johnson, presented as the baby's father, testified about their brief relationship and the unprotected sexual encounters they had. When it was time for the defense, Skylar's lawyers argued that she had been subjected to overly aggressive questioning, leading to a coerced confession. They disputed the assumption that she had attempted to burn her baby, noting that the forensic expert who initially supported this claim had later withdrawn it. They presented evidence of Skylar's significant weight fluctuations due to her long-standing battle with anorexia, which they claimed was exacerbated by her mother's pressure to remain thin. During the trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy testified that the baby died from homicidal violence of undetermined origin. Yet, under cross-examination, she admitted there was no physical evidence to support a live birth or that Skylar had directly caused harm to her child. Witnesses for the prosecution also acknowledged the lack of physical evidence of a live birth, with no trauma or burns found on the baby's remains. The defense stressed that the only evidence suggesting a live birth came from Skylar's statements, which they argued were the result of coercion by the police. An obstetrician also testified that he didn't believe the baby was alive at birth. He noted that the umbilical cord wasn't cut, which might mean it came off before or during delivery. He also mentioned how Skylar described the baby as extremely pale, not looking like a healthy newborn. He suggested that Skylar's eating disorder might have limited the baby's growth in the womb, possibly leading to a stillbirth or death shortly after birth. An expert on police questioning explained that some interrogation techniques can push people into false confessions, especially those who are more vulnerable to pressure. A clinical psychologist who talked to Skylar found she has a dependent personality disorder, which could make her more likely to give in to authority figures. The trial moved forward with both sides presenting their arguments and evidence. The defense attorney emphasized that Skylar is innocent until proven guilty, urging the jury to stand by her if they had any doubts about the baby's condition at birth. The prosecution argued that Skylar had ended a life to keep up appearances and should be held accountable. The trial was intense, and eventually the jury had to decide Skylar's fate.
With regard to count one, we, the jury in the above captioned case, find the defendant, Brooke Skylar Richardson, not guilty of the offense of aggravated murder.
On September 12, 2019, after 4 hours, they ruled she wasn't guilty of the most serious charges, but did find her guilty of improperly handling the baby's remains, which could mean up to a year in jail. The Richardson family was relieved by the verdict but had to wait until sentencing. The next day, Skylar spoke publicly for the first time in court, expressing regret and apologizing for the pain caused by her actions. During a victim impact statement, Trey Johnson's mother spoke about her deep loss, saying no words could fully express her anguish over her granddaughter Annabelle's death. The judge believed different choices by Skylar could have saved her daughter, but sentenced her to 3 years of probation instead of a harsher penalty. The trial and its aftermath deeply affected Skylar and her family, causing her significant stress and health issues. 2 months after being mostly acquitted, Skylar shared her feelings in an interview with Cosmopolitan magazine. She talked about her regrets and the burden of guilt she carries every day for not opening up sooner about her situation. She described the period as devastating and admitted to struggling with depression since the incident. Skylar shared that she named her baby Annabelle because she didn't know anyone else with that name. She visits Annabelle's grave every week to leave pink flowers and finds a bit of peace knowing her baby is at rest. During an interview, Skylar opened up about how the trial almost broke her and even made her think about ending her life. She admitted that living with the truth was incredibly hard, especially when it felt like everyone else thought differently. She also felt like she lost a part of herself during the trial and was scared that people saw her as guilty because of all the news coverage. Trey, Annabelle's dad, told the media that he was shocked by the case because he didn't know about the pregnancy beforehand. It hit him hard when he found out months later in 2018, especially learning about it through social media when everything went public. Trey's family deeply felt the loss, and after the trial, they gathered to mark 2 years since Annabelle's passing. This whole situation really affected everyone involved. They all dealt with a lot of emotions no matter how the court ruled. Over time, Skylar got help for her eating disorders, went to college, and worked at the law firm that represented her. Her probation ended almost 2 years early in 2020. The judge decided there was no need to keep an eye on her since the crime wasn't severe. She had no prior offenses, and she was busy with work and school. In Skylar's first TV interview, her parents talked about how the case impacted them and their daughter. They mentioned a special angel marker at Annabelle's gravesite, expressing how heartbreaking it all was and how sometimes being near the grave brought them a little comfort. They also revealed that Skylar was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, suffering from frequent panic attacks and nightmares that often kept her from sleeping in her own room. In 2022, Skylar's lawyers tried to seal the court records of her conviction to help her move on, arguing that the public didn't need to see them anymore. But the prosecutors disagreed, saying it would lessen how serious her actions were. The judge ultimately decided to restrict access to the records, siding with Skylar's need for privacy, which stirred up new debates. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Don't be fooled by images of this young man with a visibly beaten face. The reality is, he has caused a real tragedy. James Lloyd Allen was born in Providence, Rhode Island, USA, on August 29, 1954. He was one of 3 children born to Lloyd James Allen and Jacqueline Allen, with siblings named Danny and John. The Allens were a typical middle-class family, closely knit and active members of St. Thomas Church. The only out-of-the-ordinary aspect was Lloyd's job. He was a police captain in Providence. As a child, Allen admired his father and the idea of doing things right, though he still found time for some mischief during his school years. Allen is remembered by his family and friends for secretly listening to his favorite baseball team, the Boston Red Sox, on a radio earpiece during class, hoping the nuns wouldn't notice. Growing up with strong values of service, he eventually followed in his father's professional footsteps. His faith also remained a crucial part of his life. By the late 1970s, during weekly prayer meetings at St. Thomas Church, Allen's attention was drawn to a woman named Marge, who was from Bristol and 4 years his senior. Despite the daily demands of his police work, Allen was too shy to approach her. However, fate intervened when Marge was robbed and contacted the police. It turned out her home was in the area Allen patrolled. When responding to the call and finally meeting her, he found himself in a comfortable role. After taking her statement, he made several follow-up visits which led to dating. They married in 1988 at St. Thomas Church. She was 38 and he was 34. Allen and Marge had different personalities, but they shared the same core values and a deep love for each other. This love was the foundation of their wonderful family. They had 2 daughters, Jennifer and Caitlin. Allen wasn't the handiest person around the house, but he was a dedicated dad who adored his daughters more than anything. To support his family, He also worked a second job as a security guard at a supermarket on the east side of the city, which allowed Marge to stay home and take care of their daughters. Their marriage was mostly peaceful. They enjoyed staying in to watch TV or play with their daughters rather than going out. The only real disagreement at home was about baseball, since Marge was a big Yankees fan and she passed that passion on to her daughters. So, whenever they watched games together, there was a bit of a friendly rivalry. As the girls grew up, Marge started working at St. Thomas School. James, on the other hand, was all in on his job in public service, truly embodying what it meant to be an excellent police officer. His co-workers and friends saw him as a man of integrity, with a lot of compassion for crime victims and a knack for solving crimes. His amazing memory and observational skills, along with his resilience and courage, were what made him stand out. He always went the extra mile and was ready to answer calls even in the middle of the night. By 2005, he had become one of the most seasoned detectives in the department, honored with numerous medals, including the Departmental Medal of Honor and the Purple Heart. Known for his signature trench coat, rain or shine, James brought laughter and comfort to Marge and their friends. Meanwhile, Esteban Carpio lived nearby and seemed to be on the wrong side of the law. Born in Boston, Massachusetts on July 30, 1978, to an unknown father, Esteban was raised by his mother, a third-grade teacher. There isn't much known about his early years. As an adult, he worked as a barber and had a history of legal troubles related to substance possession. In the early 2000s, he started a relationship with Samaine Finn. They later had a daughter together. Esteban's behavior started to change for the worse in late 2004. He began acting oddly, claiming to hear voices and believing that a friend had cursed him or used voodoo on him. Whether true or not, his girlfriend took him to a Buddhist temple for help, where a monk tried to protect him by tying a rope around his waist. But it didn't help, and his condition didn't improve, so his mother called for a psychiatric evaluation. The doctors linked his issues to stress and substance abuse, but it's unclear if any steps were taken to address his substance use. The following year, with no improvement in his condition, his mother, Yvonne Carpio, took him back to the hospital. That spring, Esteban crossed paths with Madeline Gata, an 84-year-old active woman who loved her craft of sewing. She had worked as an interior decorator and had created custom designs for various clients. She was also a proud grandmother to 6 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. On April 16, 2005, after finishing work early in the afternoon, Detective James grabbed a quick bite at a favorite spot before heading home. Meanwhile, Esteban, who was driving nearby, spotted Madeline. Seeing her as an easy target, he quickly got out of his car with a knife. He tried to steal her purse but ended up hurting her with the knife. Her screams alerted people nearby, and one quick-thinking neighbor noted Esteban's car license plate as he ran away. Madeline was taken to a health center where she managed to report what happened. Around 7 in the evening, James's phone rang at home, and he promptly answered. The call was about the attack on the elderly woman and the suspect's clear description, prompting the detective to spring into action. The police team, including James, arrived at Esteban's residence the next day. According to statements from Esteban's family, they warned the officers that Esteban was experiencing a mental crisis, having trouble sleeping, and was not in his right mind. Minutes later, he was taken to the Providence police station for questioning. Once there, he was led to a conference room on the 3rd floor and, as he was not under arrest, his handcuffs were removed. Detective James, assisted by another detective, began the interrogation. James was armed, as per regulation. Initially, Esteban provided a false name, denied any previous arrests, and claimed innocence. When Detective James warned him that he knew his real identity and was aware of his criminal record, Esteban became agitated and asked the other detective for some water. After the other detective left the room, Esteban managed to seize James's gun under unclear circumstances and lock the door from the inside. Timothy, the other detective, later recounted hearing Detective James screaming for help, saying Esteban was going to kill him. Shots were heard, and when they finally broke down the door, they found James dying from 2 fatal wounds, one to the chest and another to the forehead. Esteban had attacked the detective with his own gun and escaped by shooting out a window in an adjoining room, falling onto the grass below. A chaotic scene ensued outside the police headquarters as local, state, and federal officers launched a relentless citywide manhunt for the suspect. Meanwhile, James was rushed to Providence Hospital, but despite all medical efforts, he was declared deceased. Esteban was apprehended after an hour-long search, following a violent confrontation with a taxi driver. His capture was not easy. He was combative and violent. The police officers struck him 3 times in the face. From there, the officers took him to Rhode Island Hospital, where he was administered sedatives and later interviewed. The exchange was captured on a recording that clearly showcased Esteban's distressed voice. At the same time, the doorbell rang at the Allen home. While their daughters slept, Marge went downstairs to find 3 officers at the door. She invited them in, and they delivered the tragic news inside. Marge, stunned, asked where it had happened. Learning it was at the police station, she couldn't believe it. Of all places, that should have been the safest for a police officer. From that moment, her mind struggled to function normally, and the pain hit her hard. The officers called friends of the Allens to stay with the girls and then escorted Marge to the hospital in a patrol car, as only a direct relative could claim the body. She later recounted how the hospital corridors were filled with police officers, all nodding respectfully as she passed. They led her to the trauma room. Her husband lay on the table. The wounds were lethal, yet not visible. On Monday, April 18, 2005, at 10 a.m., a second interview took place at police headquarters. A hysterical Esteban was interrogated again. During the interview, Esteban often rambled, insisting he was insane and unloved. This exchange was also recorded. Meanwhile, the police chief and James's colleagues gathered at the Providence District Court, awaiting Esteban's arraignment. Beyond showing solidarity and affection for their fallen comrade, they wanted to see the man capable of such actions. The tension in the room was palpable as all eyes turned to Esteban, who walked with difficulty, his hands and feet shackled. Several officers escorted him. He had bruises and cuts on his face and wore a white mask covering from his chin to his eyes, making him resemble Hannibal Lecter from The Silence of the Lambs. The moans and screams of his mother and girlfriend soon followed. His mother immediately accused the police of beating her son. Officials struggled to remove both women from the courtroom as they continued to cry out about cover-ups and police brutality. Esteban's face was bleeding and sweating. His eyes were swollen, and his cheeks, forehead, and skull area were severely bruised. His face was marred with multiple bruises and scars. However, such a mask, known as a spit shield, is used by law enforcement when a suspect is injured or combative. Due to Esteban's previous state, the officers decided to take maximum precautions and placed a spit shield on him. They explained that he had injured a leg, an arm, and his head when he jumped out of the window. When accused of murder, he responded by nodding, not denying the crime committed. He only spoke to tell his mother he loved her as he was escorted out of the courtroom. Subsequently, Esteban was detained without bail. Given that the victim was an on-duty police officer, the charge carried a maximum sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As is common in such cases that shock the public, a press conference led by the police chief was necessary. However, many questions remained unanswered as he did not explain how Esteban managed to seize the officer's gun or the details leading up to the sequence of gunshots. He also did not discuss weapon-carrying protocols within police facilities or associated interrogation procedures, nor did he mention if there were any witnesses. Instead, he expressed heartfelt words for Detective James. James was posthumously promoted to the rank of Detective Sergeant. On April 21, 2005, a sea of police officers and officials accompanied the procession preceding his funeral service. Although it could have been held at the downtown cathedral, Marge chose differently, faithful to the story that had always connected them to St. Thomas Church. The funeral service was held there. After the religious ceremony, James was taken on a 4-mile final journey to St. Anne's Cemetery by a horse-drawn carriage. Marge was moved to see thousands of people, including police officers from across the country, lining the route. Beyond the crime and ensuing mourning, the case of the detective brought to the forefront a long-standing concern: the security in government buildings. Unfortunately, it wasn't the first time such an incident had occurred. For some time, visitors to the Providence Police Building had to pass through a metal detector. What no one had anticipated was that an individual would disarm an officer of his service weapon. In this context, Michael Brady, a police procedures expert and professor at the University in Newport, Rhode Island, mentioned that it was not unusual for a detective to interrogate a suspect while armed. Thus, James was not doing anything different from what police officers do daily across the country. However, the controversy over alleged police abuse against Esteban dominated headlines and online news portals. Later, an investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) concluded that there was no excessive force by the Providence police, who were compelled to subdue the man due to his violent behavior. It was a special agent from the FBI who presented the report to the press, adding that if the subject resisted the police officers, they were fully justified in using whatever force necessary to subdue him. Despite these claims, Esteban's family continued to insist on the accusations against law enforcement and highlighted Esteban's mental disorder.
It's police brutality. He was mentally ill and he needed help and we couldn't get it. We tried and tried. And he didn't deserve this.
And in fact, his defense team centered their strategy around his mental disturbance. During the trial preparations, Esteban was evaluated by several mental health experts. The defense enlisted a psychiatrist and forensic neuropsychologist. After reviewing Esteban's medical records from hospital visits prior to the incident and listening to tapes of post-arrest interviews, these specialists concluded that the accused suffered from schizophrenic psychosis and an acute onset of paranoid psychosis. The state's evaluation was conducted by neuropsychologist and professor David Faust and forensic psychiatrist and psychiatry professor Martin Kelly. Insanity defenses are used in a small fraction of U.S. criminal cases and are rarely successful. According to experts in psychiatry and law, jurors might be skeptical that mental illness absolves someone from a crime or fear that a not guilty verdict could ultimately release a dangerous individual back into society. Esteban was charged with assaulting Madeline, the 84-year-old woman with a knife, as well as the murder of James. The trial began in June 2006. In his opening statement to the jury, the defense attorney acknowledged that the evidence of his client committing the actions was overwhelming. However, the key question for him was whether Esteban was too disturbed to be held fully accountable. One of the first witnesses was a police officer who admitted during his testimony that Esteban had been beaten during the arrest. On June 19th, the accused's mother and his 24-year-old girlfriend testified about Esteban's alarming behavior prior to the incidents. Following their testimonies, 2 doctors took the stand. Both specialists argued that the accused lacked the capacity to commit the crime due to the severe effects of schizophrenia, and thus should not be held fully responsible. The next day, the state countered by presenting Professor David and forensic psychiatrist Martin. Professor David testified that he had examined the results of psychological tests administered to the accused while he awaited trial at the Adult Correctional Institute and concluded that the administration of the test and subsequent results were questionable and that Esteban's responses indicated feigning and malingering. Forensic psychiatrist Martin then testified that at the time of the crimes, Esteban did not suffer from any mental disease or defect that would have prevented him from understanding the wrongfulness of his actions or conforming his conduct to the requirements of the law. In summary, they described him as manipulative, with a pronounced criminal and antisocial profile. After about 9 hours of deliberation, the jury rejected the insanity defense and delivered their verdict, finding Esteban guilty of first-degree murder of Detective James. He was also found guilty of firing a weapon during a violent crime that resulted in death and of assaulting Madeline with a dangerous weapon. Meanwhile, the cries of Esteban's family members filled the gallery. The court offered to consider a new trial motion after the July 4th holiday, but Esteban's defense attorney emailed the court on July 5, 2006, indicating that no such motion would be filed. The sentencing hearing took place on October 6, 2006. In his first public statement since the trial began, Esteban told the court that his life and health were fine until something happened one day that he could not control. Then, in tears, he apologized to the Allen family for what had occurred.
Every day, I face the facts of what I did and what happened.
The judge then sentenced him to 2 consecutive life sentences, one without the possibility of parole for the crime against James, and an additional consecutive 20-year sentence for the aggravated assault on Madeline. The judge harshly addressed the defendant, stating that the court had no doubt he was incorrigible. Thus, allowing even the possibility of parole was antithetical in a civilized society. The Attorney General released a statement hours later, praising the judgment as a gesture to honor the memory of one of the best officers of the Providence Police Department. Subsequently, the Rhode Island Supreme Court upheld the convictions and denied the defense's request to reduce the life sentence without parole. As for Madeline, she recovered without complications. Since James's burial, Marge made it a habit to visit her husband's grave about 4 times a year. She always smiled, remembering that James rested near a cemetery path. After all, watching who passed by was part of his job. She consistently left floral arrangements that included a white rose, with no particular reason for choosing that color, but it became a tradition for the detective's widow. In 2015, on the 10th anniversary of her husband's death, Marge found the courage to consider her first interview. She acknowledged that, for the first 9 years, a physical pain in her chest prevented her from speaking. However, she eventually overcame the pain. During that interview with a reporter, she felt free to criticize the negative press often directed at law enforcement officers. Marge knew firsthand that police work is challenging and involves making difficult decisions. Once she broke her silence, she also addressed the numerous accusations of racism associated with her husband's case. When asked if speaking out would help her find closure, she disagreed with the term, stating there is no closure, just time that always flies by, gradually healing the wounds. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.